August 21st, 1986, 9 p.m. High up in the volcanic highlands of northwest Cameroon, the village of Nyos is just settling down for the night. The cooking fires are fading out, the local herders have counted their cattle, and honestly, everything is perfectly peaceful under a sky thick with stars. Right above them, tucked behind some forested ridges, sits Lake Nyos. It's a gorgeous, deep blue crater lake. The villagers know this water intimately. They fish there, they bathe their kids in the shallows, they have absolutely zero reason to fear it. But at this exact date and time, that perfectly calm, glass-like water is about to turn into an unimaginable weapon.
1,746. That is the human death toll. And you can add 3,500 head of livestock to that number too. All of those lives entirely extinguished in just a matter of hours. But what makes this mass casualty event so fundamentally chilling isn't just the sheer number. It's that not a single drop of blood was spilled. There wasn't a single damaged building, no collapsed structures, no fires, nothing.
The sheer speed of this invisible threat is, well, it's terrifying. At 9 p.m., witnesses hear this low, rumbling boom rolling out from the lake. Just 5 minutes later, at 9:05, an invisible cloud pours into Lower Nyos. It is racing downhill through the valleys at roughly 50 kilometers an hour. It just slides through open doorways and windows, it finds people asleep on their woven mats, it finds cattle out in the fields, and by 10:30 p.m., the neighboring villages of Kam, Cha, and Subum join Nyos in complete, utter silence. Entire families suffocated mid-breath, literally frozen in place.
The absolute horror of the aftermath was probably best captured by a Catholic priest from a nearby parish. He arrived at dawn on his motorcycle, just expecting a routine check on his flock, and instead rode straight into a waking nightmare. He, along with a tiny handful of bewildered survivors who had woken up with chemical burns and splitting headaches, found their entire world perfectly intact but completely dead around them. Unmarked bodies lay exactly where they'd fallen. It was as if someone had just flipped a switch.
So, what on earth happened? The crime scene facing international scientists was frankly impossible. Desperate theories were flying around only to be immediately thrown out. A traditional volcanic eruption? Nope, no lava, no ash. A terrorist bomb or some kind of chemical attack? Again, disproven. Zero blast pattern, no shrapnel. The international press was even whispering about a top-secret neutron weapon test, but there was no radiation, and the delicate mud brick huts were completely pristine.
To find the real killer, we actually have to look at the water itself. Think about your average lake. Changing seasons usually cause the surface water to cool, sink, and churn. That mixing process is super important because it allows naturally occurring gases to easily bubble up and just dissipate harmlessly into the air. But Lake Nyos, it's perfectly still. It's tropical, so there are no cold autumn storms to churn up the depths. The layers of water just stack on top of each other, like thick, heavy sheets of glass that never ever mix.
Here's the crazy part. Lake Nyos is what geologists call a Maar, a crater gouged out by a giant volcanic explosion some 400 years ago. It plunges nearly 700 feet deep. But that underlying volcano, it never actually died. It just went quiet. For centuries, the magma chamber deep beneath the bedrock was slowly, patiently, exhaling invisible, odorless carbon dioxide. And because the lake never churned, the immense weight of that deep water simply trapped the gas at the bottom. It dissolved it into the water, exactly the same way pressure traps the fizz inside an unopened bottle of soda.
Fast forward to August 1986. The bottom of Lake Nyos is holding over a cubic kilometer of highly compressed poison. It was a loaded gun, just waiting for a trigger to pull the cork. We still don't know exactly what did it. Maybe a small landslide, maybe a sudden cold downdraft, or maybe the water literally just couldn't hold one more single ounce of gas. But whatever it was, the pressure broke. The lake violently reared up in an 80-foot wave, uncorking itself. Over 1 billion cubic yards of pure, suffocating gas explosively boiled out of the water in a matter of minutes.
But hang on, this brings us to a really crucial question. If 1 billion cubic yards of gas erupts into the open air, why didn't it just drift up and away? Why didn't it float into the sky and harmlessly blow over the villages?
The answer is an absolutely terrifying quirk of physics. Carbon dioxide is 50% heavier than the air we breathe. So the gas didn't act like a cloud at all. It acted like water. It formed an invisible roaring river of heavy gas that poured right over the lip of the crater and violently flooded the valleys below. It hugged the ground tightly, pushing away every single molecule of oxygen from the floor up, effectively drowning everything in its path in a sea of toxic, unbreathable air.
Science ultimately had to give this invisible flood a formal name: a limnic eruption. It's defined as the sudden, catastrophic outgassing of dissolved carbon dioxide from the depths of a stratified volcanic lake. It sounds incredibly clinical now, but until that devastating night in 1986, this phenomenon was almost completely unknown to science.
But as researchers rushed to understand this, they realized something even scarier. Nyos wasn't just a freak one-off anomaly. Look at Lake Kivu, sitting right on the border of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Kivu holds roughly 300 times more dissolved gas than Nyos ever did. And sitting directly in its potential flood path, 2 million people. The ticking time bomb wasn't just isolated to a single valley in Cameroon. A massive population was living right on top of an even bigger one.
Obviously, the international community knew they couldn't just leave these lakes sitting there as loaded weapons. So, a team of French engineers came up with an audaciously simple plan to prevent a second tragedy. Just degas the lake. They somehow had to safely drain a cubic kilometer of compressed poison before the lake could explode again.
But how do you actually do that without bringing in massive, complex industrial machinery? Well, they relied entirely on the exact same physics as that open soda bottle we talked about earlier. First, they drop a long, simple polyethylene pipe straight down to the lake bed. Then, they pump a little bit of the bottom water upward just to get things moving. As that deep water rises, the pressure on it drops, and those trapped gas bubbles start to expand violently. And here is the absolute genius part. The expanding bubbles shoot the water upward so incredibly fast that it creates a vacuum behind it, sucking up more water from the bottom. It turns into a self-sustaining, completely electricity-free, perpetual fountain.
It was such a simple fix, but brilliantly effective, and the results were almost immediate. In 2001, they installed the very first pipe at Lake Nyos. By 2008, a smaller neighboring lake, Lake Maar, was officially declared safe. And by 2011, engineers added 2 more pipes to Nyos to really accelerate the bleeding of the lake.
If you go there today, the landscape is definitely eerie, but it's safe. 150-foot plumes of water and gas just hiss endlessly into the sky from the center of the lake. It's essentially a perpetual exhalation, an intentional open wound designed to guarantee the lake can never build up that kind of deadly pressure ever again. Thanks to this, many villages are slowly being resettled, and that massive threat at Lake Kivu, they're actually carefully tapping into it right now to use its trapped gases for power generation, turning a massive hazard into a usable asset. Yet, despite this incredible engineering triumph, the human scars of 1986 are still carved deeply into the landscape. Many of the survivors, the ones who woke up on that awful morning to find their families, their friends, and their livestock completely gone, they never went back to those quiet valleys. The old cattle paths are completely overgrown now. The remaining mud brick walls are just quietly crumbling back into the earth. The deep blue water is still up there, beautiful and perfectly calm, watching over the valleys exactly as it has for 400 years. But on certain cool, quiet nights, you can almost imagine that faint metallic taste on the tongue and the terrible realization of the villagers in their final seconds. A lake exhaled, and 1,746 souls forgot how to breathe.